Hey friend, welcome to the Self-Care Isn't Selfish podcast. I'm your host, Emily Nichols. As a Whole30 certified coach, wife, busy working boy mom, and your self-care guru, I'm here to help you start putting yourself first without the guilt. Each week you'll hear motivating and practical tips on how you can create a habit of self-care through interviews with my amazing guests or quick solo episodes with me. After each episode, you'll walk away with an action plan and feel empowered to implement what you have learned into your life. So grab a cup of coffee, glass of wine, or your favorite sparkling water, and let's do this. You're listening to episode 10 of the Self-Care Isn't Selfish podcast. I can't believe I'm 10 episodes in, you guys. Thank you so much for listening and for your support. If this is your first time listening, though, I would highly suggest you go back and listen to my previous episodes with my guests speaking on all different areas of self-care and some quickie tips from me as well. So when I was envisioning what this podcast was going to look like, I wanted to bring in a lot of different perspectives on self-care. And one of the first people I thought of was Cortney Given. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about Cortney here in a minute. But today our show is all focused on self-care when it's hard. Okay, so I preach about why self-care is so important in my own journey in my previous episodes about how I have learned to put my own oxygen mask on first. But I want to preface this by saying I know there's a lot of seasons of life where self-care kind of seems impossible. And I know that, and Cortney knows that, speaking from our own personal experience, because we both have children that were born with a congenital heart defect. So 1 in 100 babies are born with a congenital heart defect, or a CHD as we may call it. There's over 30 different kinds. And my oldest son, Dylan, he's 11 now. He's in 6th grade, a middle schooler, which is crazy. Oh my gosh, he's got armpit hair, you guys. I may have to edit that out. He would kill me. But we're going through all these changes. But in 2008, Dylan was born with a pretty severe congenital heart defect. We didn't know he was going to be born with this. We found out when he was about 5 hours old. He was looking a little blue. The doctors could hear a heart murmur, which they just took him down the NICU. So we're just going to check him out. And I had a C-section in the middle of the night. And so we're like, okay, do whatever you got to do. I'm sure he's fine. And then our whole world was turned upside down within the next few minutes because they said, okay, he was born with tetralogy of Fallot. You can Google it which I never heard of it before until my son was born. But pretty much he had no pulmonary valve and a very big hole in between the chambers of his heart. So he had a surgery when he was a few days old to kind of open up a valve that would kind of help him get a little bigger before he had to have his big open heart surgery, which he had when he was 8 months old. Just to give you an idea, this particular congenital heart defect, kind of a nickname for it, is called blue baby syndrome. By the time Dylan was 8 months old, his oxygen levels were down around 68%, which they said if he was an adult, he would have been laid up in a bed, but he wasn't. He was scooting around. He was having some problems feeding, but it wasn't anything major. But he always looked blue, especially around his lips and his fingertips, and we did everything possible to help him not cry for too long because he could have passed out from the lack of oxygen. So in 2008, while this was all happening, self-care wasn't even part of my routine. It wasn't even part of my vocabulary. So I want to be sensitive in this episode and say, I talk a lot about self-care, but it is easier said than done when you're going through such a hard thing as your child receiving some type of diagnosis or having a very complex medical condition. So Cortney and I are going to share some tips that helped get us through a really hard time in our life and hopefully inspire you to think of some ways to take care of yourself when you're going through a really hard time in your life as well. So let me tell you a little bit more about Cortney. I love this girl. I found her on Instagram, gosh, probably like a year and a half ago. Whole30 had shared a post that she did, and I tapped on it and I was just like, oh my gosh, she's a heart mom like me. So she gets it. And she has a really cool story. I can't wait for you to listen in about her journey with her daughter Zola and her congenital heart defect. But let me tell you a little bit more about Cortney. She's a wife, she's a mom to three little girls, and she's a Instagram blogger and life coach. So after her daughter's CHD diagnosis, she said her whole world was just turned upside down. And she has used mindfulness and thought work to help her navigate the trenches with, a medically complex child. A lot of times with the congenital heart defect, it's not a one and done, they're fixed. Both of our kiddos are going to have more surgeries in the future. So she now uses the tools that has helped her get through this really difficult time and teaches others to cope with either a serious diagnosis, going through motherhood, or just everyday life. So like I said, I want to be sensitive and know that there's different seasons of your life and things are hard, but I hope you leave inspired today to find your own version of self-care when you're going through a hard time. So, thanks so much for listening in and enjoy this episode with Cortney Given. Okay, gang, I am here with Cortney Given. She has so graciously agreed to come on the Self Care Isn't Selfish podcast and share her story for you guys. She is a mom and a life coach, and she has a really interesting perspective to share with us today, all about self-care, but I'll let her tell her story. But everyone, let's welcome Cortney. Cortney, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you. I'm so excited.
Awesome. Well, I want to just start off with you telling everyone a little bit about yourself and your story.
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Cortney, and I do little mini blogging through Instagram, and I share our family's life. It kind of happened by a whirlwind when my daughter was diagnosed with hypoplastic left heart syndrome. We were living in Hawaii at the time, and I was 18 weeks pregnant, and they told us, you can't have your baby here in Hawaii, you have to leave. So we put our life on pause and we headed back to Southern California, where my husband and I are from. And we were in California for 9 months while she got her open heart surgeries and essentially saved her life.
Awesome. So you were sharing Zola's story online and connecting with people just with her story then, huh?
Yeah. So I immediately went to Instagram after I got diagnosed because I just wanted to see someone living normal life, and I couldn't find hardly anyone. And I don't know if I was just looking in the wrong places, but I decided that I wanted to share, because if someone else had this problem, if someone else wanted to just see someone with normal life, I wanted to give them the opportunity to see that and give someone hope. And so that's what I did. I just started sharing our journey and our process, and it's grown into a beautiful little community over there.
That's awesome. That's funny you say that, because I know I shared with you my oldest son, Dylan, who's 11, was born with a congenital heart defect, and we didn't know he was going to be born with a heart problem. We found out when he was about 5 hours old, but that was one of the first things I did. I was like, I want to find other families who have children with a congenital heart defect and see that they're living normal, healthy, happy lives. I think the power of connection when you're going through something like that is so extremely powerful and helps you through such a hard situation.
Yes, just as soon as I was able to find other people that have done it, it just relieved so much stress that I was not the only person, that this wasn't the only thing. And that's something I just love about social media and people being able to connect and knowing that you're not alone, and knowing that other people are out there struggling with something that you think is so rare.
Yeah. And actually, it's I mean, it's rare, but it's not really rare. There's so many different types of congenital heart defects, and it's interesting how people just come out of the woodwork. Like, well, I know this person, or I know that person. I've known so many people from
Yes,
high school now that's had kiddos born with heart defects, and then reach out to you or me, and like, hey, I want to share my story, and connect with someone else too.
absolutely. Yeah, 1 in 100 babies are born with a heart defect, and I had no idea until I was that 1 in 100.
Yep. Oh my gosh. I don't know how many times I said that. It's like I had no idea until my baby was that one. So awesome. Well, how is Zola doing today?
She is doing super great. We're just prepping and waiting and keeping her healthy until next summer, where she'll have her third and hopefully final open heart surgery.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I've been following along, and I'm going to keep praying for Zola. I bet she's going to keep on rocking through those surgeries.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Awesome. So, Cortney, I start off every podcast asking my guests what self-care means to you. And I know you're a busy mom and, a heart mom as well, which I think is a really interesting perspective. But Cortney, what does self-care mean to you?
Self-care is balancing your long-term goals with short-term discomfort. What I mean by that is that we need to use self-care as the tools to get us to where we want to go. We first have to know ourselves. We first have to know where we want to go.
How's that saying go? Oh yeah, all things are possible with coffee and mascara. Well, that's certainly true for me, and I love to have my coffee every morning after my workout, and I don't really leave the house without mascara. So my fellow blondies, I know you feel me on this. But gang, check it out. Having my coffee every morning is part of my self-care routine, and I always take my coffee blended with Nutpods and coconut oil. So Nutpods is a dairy-free creamer. It's made from a blend of almond butter and coconut cream. I love the French vanilla flavor. It's my favorite. It's super yummy, super smooth, but even better, it's Whole30 approved. So gang, head on over to nutpods.com and use the code EmilyNichols22 to get 15% off your first order of Nutpods. That's EmilyNichols22, EmilyNichols22. And let me know once you receive your Nutpods what your favorite flavor is and how you take your coffee. So remember, just head on over to nutpods.com. You're saying it's a tool. In order to you figure out yourself, and then you use those different self-care. You got a bunch of different self-care pieces in your tool belt, and how to use those to become the best you.
Yes.
Awesome. So like I said, I thought you have a really interesting perspective coming from being a heart mom. So did you know Zola was going to be born with her heart defect?
Yes. We did know, and it was a very interesting dynamic because I was really grateful we knew for the fact that we were in Hawaii and we couldn't have her here, but also knowing about it ahead of time put like this almost a doomsday effect. Like we knew our world was coming to an end, and like just living in that grief and the emotions that led us up to this moment of like going to California and then being induced with her, and all of the process of it was a little overwhelming.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure a lot of your pregnancy, you had a lot of fear, and it was a lot of the unknown for you.
Yeah, absolutely. We were just so confused, and we felt really led to Hawaii, and we felt really sure about our path. And then when we got our whole world turned upside down, we just felt really lost and totally blindsided. So she was 100% worth it. Every little moment of unknown and fear and confusion, she was totally worth it. But that journey, it was like I always would tell my husband, most people don't know ahead of time that there's something bad or like challenging happening. Our trials come to us so randomly and unexpected but then we just had to like sit and watch it come towards us. And it was just so unnerving at times.
Yeah. How did you guys deal with that together as a couple?
I actually right away told my husband that I was nervous for our marriage, just because I knew that the chances increase to put strain on your marriage when you have a child with any kind of diagnosis. And so I had a friend who had also had a medically complicated child. It was a totally different diagnosis, but I went to her right away and she gave me some advice. And so we just made sure that we connected regularly through date nights, and we tried to keep our communication really open about how we felt. I needed to regularly talk about how I felt, and my husband mostly just didn't like to address certain situations about the future that we didn't know about. So I made sure to respect his boundaries about what we could and couldn't talk about. And he let me express my emotions and be sad and cry, and just knowing each other's
Yeah.
way of dealing with a hard thing was important for us.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really smart. And just communicating that with each other too. So it's a great way to be there for each other. So I imagine you've been in a hospital room or two and spent some time there. Do you feel like you were ever able to make self-care a priority when you were at the hospital?
Yes, no. I didn't realize it until a little bit in, because I just assumed we were going to get the heart surgery and leave. Like everything was going to go okay. And I didn't expect complications. First time for 9 weeks. And after the first 2 weeks, I realized I'm like, I don't know when we're going to leave. Like this was just so daunting. And I know many families that end up there for months, and it totally changes you because you feel like the world around you stops. You go into the hospital and the world stops, and yet then you exit the hospital and the world is still going.
Yeah.
And it's so disorienting for you. So once we realized that we might be there for a while, she had some complications and ended up on ECMO, and we were like so thrown off. So my husband needed to work out. So he worked out almost every day. He would either go to our little gym at the Ronald McDonald House, or he would go on a run. I am an extrovert and I thrive off of my friendships and connecting with people. So I would call a friend and they would meet me for lunch. They'd come and say hi to Zola and then meet me for lunch somewhere. And that was really good to just connect with people that I loved and that cared about our family. And the hospital was really crucial for us. And then we would try to like sneak away a few times a week and get dinner outside of the hospital and just have like a mini date night. And it would feel weird calling it a date night, but it really was so important for us to connect, even when we were in the throes of the hospital world.
Yeah. Did it ever make you feel guilty at first when you would go have those mini date nights? Because I get what you mean. Like, because I know when my son was in the hospital, we would go, we didn't have any other children yet. So we would go and maybe have dinner together. And it was like, oh, I feel bad not being at the hospital. Or what's he doing right now? Where's his oxygen levels at? And,
Yes. Yeah, I think we both felt guilty, but we knew it was necessary because it was like survival mode. And all of the hospital staff was super encouraging to take care of ourselves. They just always encouraged us to take breaks and get food, and were super supportive. My husband had a little bit of a harder time. Like he almost had this internal clock in him that if we had been out for an hour, he'd be like, it's time to go. We need to get back. I was a little bit more relaxed just because it felt so good to be outside of the hospital. But yeah, we both struggled with knowing good boundaries to keep.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting how you said, the hospital's so disorienting, because you're right. It's like the world stops when you're in there, but it's still going. It's almost like time goes by fast when you're there, but it also stands still, if that makes sense. If anyone who's ever had a kiddo in the hospital, they have to know what that means.
Yes, that's exactly how it feels. I remember sometimes we would take turns spending the night at the hospital, and one night I left and I went to Target and I was just walking the aisles, feeling so exhausted, but needing to do something other than sit in the hospital room. And everyone around me was living a life and had no idea what I was going through. And I didn't know what, and then it made me think, I don't know what they're going through.
Sure.
And it just gave me so much humility and compassion for the world. And I was just having like this little, like, mini, like, breakthrough in my brain in the middle of Target. And it was just so crazy that I was experiencing this and no one knew. And it just made me have more compassion for the people around me, because you never know what people are going through at any given time.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Because I think sometimes when you're so caught up in your own troubles, whether it would be a medical diagnosis with your child or relationship issues or losing a job, sometimes it's hard to lose. You lose that perspective that other people are having a hard time. And I think that's amazing that, you're wandering Target exhausted as all get out and thinking, well, I bet they're going through maybe something too. So that's great. You obviously have a really big heart, but I know it's hard to get to that place though too.
Yeah, it was just so weird and disorienting, because I wanted to like just scream at everyone and just say, my daughter's in the hospital. Like, it just is so emotional. It's just this roller coaster of experiences. And yeah, it was quite the experience being in there for so long. And I say that with, it's all relative.
Yeah.
I know so many families that end up there for months. So
Yeah. So what advice would you tell another parent if they are listening to this and they're sitting in a hospital room with their baby or kiddo? What advice would you give them to help them keep going? Because I know it's minute by minute, day by day when you're in that hospital room with your kiddo.
for sure. One, I would say that you are not alone. It feels so lonely in those hospital rooms, and especially when your family or your friends who've never been through something like that, they're supportive, but they don't always get it.
Yes.
And they don't really understand what it's like. And I want to emphasize that you're not alone. There are so many families out there that understand and that love you and can see you in your place where you are now. And two, I would say that whatever you're feeling is totally valid, because there is no right way to endure a child that has a heart defect or any other complicated diagnosis. We don't have a manual, unfortunately, to tell us how to experience this. So any emotion you're feeling is valid, and anything that you're going through is completely valid and normal.
That's great. Because like you said, it's a emotional roller coaster. You're sad, you're mad, and then, you're watching TV or read something and you laugh, and then you feel bad about laughing. And, but like you said, every emotion you feel is valid and you're totally not alone. I mean, and shout out to all of the nurses and doctors out there, because they do such an amazing job of taking care of parents too when you're there with a sick kiddo. I know for me, my son, I had a C-section, and those nurses were making sure I was well fed and taken care of, and they were pushing me around in a wheelchair when I shouldn't have been walking and making sure I was taken care of too.
Yes, the nurses are superheroes. Seriously, angels on earth.
Yes. Yes. So, well, what does self-care look like to you now? Because you have more than just one kiddo.
Yeah, 3 girls, girl mama.
Oh my gosh. Don't know what that's like with my 2 boys. So how old are your other girls?
Yeah, I have a 4-year-old, and then I have Zola, who's 2, and I just had a baby. Am I still allowed to say that? I just had a baby in February, and she's 6 months old.
Okay.
Or I guess when this is recorded, she'll be a little older.
That's awesome. Well, what does self-care look like to you now as a mom to three little girls?
Yeah, I've been on a really interesting journey through self-care, knowing that the first wake-up call I had was just allowing myself to be a person and take up space in my own family. Sometimes I think that us women, we just tend to put ourselves on the back burner. And I was doing it in so many little ways that I didn't even realize until I realized that I needed to just speak up for myself. And there was nothing that my family was doing except being, people. Like, but it dawned on me one time we were walking through the store and my husband's like, oh yeah, I need to get some deodorant and some hair gel. And I don't know what it was about the way he said that, but we were on a pretty tight budget at the time. And I had been needing deodorant and a few random things for so long, but I just never said anything about it because I just thought, we're on a tight budget. And I thought, wow, like he didn't even think twice. Like he's just doing it because he needs to take care of himself. And I said, yeah, I need deodorant and razors. And it just felt so freeing and empowering, which just sounds so silly. But apparently I have these moments in Target that are teaching me some life lessons. But so I just went and got my stuff and I was like, I need to speak up more. So just telling my husband, just speaking up and telling him what I need is so powerful. I need to take a shower. I'm going to go shower. I need to go take a break and walk Whole Foods for a little bit and go get an herbal tea and just breathe, and he's always so supportive. So as soon as I just communicate that need, it usually is easy to do, but I have to communicate and stand up for myself. And I say that lightly because no one's bullying me, but it's just in my own head. Sometimes I get caught up in taking care of my own self and making sure I'm prioritizing me in my own life.
I think that's such a valid point because, like you said, it's not like everyone's doing it on purpose or like putting themselves first and you're just like, oh, I'm last. Like you said, I just think we internally just automatically put everyone else first until you're finally at the breaking point where you're like, I need deodorant too.
Yeah,
I get
exactly.
that. I could see where your story was going because I could relate to that. I could relate to that. So, and I wanted to bring up a post you did on your Instagram a little bit ago that I thought was so cool. It was when you went to get family pictures and it started pouring down rain during your pictures. And you got all your pictures in the rain. Like it's raining in your pictures. You guys are completely soaked. And I freaking loved it. And just the whole analogy you had around that. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, we had this shoot planned and I was super busy at the time and I kind of procrastinated getting some few pieces together, and my husband got off work and we were kind of rushed, and family pictures are the bane of every family's
Oh
existence
my
because it's
gosh.
just so stressful and everyone's in a bad mood. And so we were just driving, we were late. I had to pick my dress up and it was just bananas. And we get there and my photographer is incredible. She's a good friend of mine. And she was like, well, it's going to rain. I hope that we can get a few pictures before it starts pouring. And we started to take pictures and then it just started pouring. And we were like, whatever, let's just keep going. And it just made all of our, like, mine and my husband's stress from the 20 minutes prior just melt away. And it was so fun just having our kids run around in the water and run around in the rain, and all of a sudden their moods perked up, which I would thought have done the opposite, but they were super excited to take pictures in the rain. And it was just this beautiful moment. We were doing it in honor of our 7-year anniversary, and we just really looked at each other. We're like, this is the perfect analogy for life, because it was so sunny and beautiful and yet dumping on us. And we were like, yeah, this is what life is about. Like just finding the beauty in those moments that are stressful and sometimes overwhelming, but actually where all of our power and growth come from.
You're exactly right. Yeah. Whatever storm you're going through, it's all in how you deal with it. I mean, that could have just totally made you even in the most worse mood than what you already were in. You know, trust me, I get family pictures. You're sitting there smiling, but it was super stressful getting them dressed and getting them there, and they're not getting dirty. But yeah,
Exactly.
just that whole analogy and how you guys dealt with it, I think, like you said, it's a really great analogy for life and whatever storm you're going through, you know. And I always say, with no rain, there's no flowers, there's no rainbows. So there's always something good that can come through going through a storm, and just thinking about how you deal with it and get through it too. I love that.
Yes. Embracing the things that are in front of us is so powerful.
Yeah. And, you know, I know that's really easy to say now, but I know there's a lot of other heart moms or dads or families in general listening, and they're in the thick of it, and they're in that storm. Their umbrella's turned upside down. It's blowing away. And, you know, like I said, it's really easy to say it when you're on the other side of it, but I think you had some really great points, just to mention that you're not alone. There's other families like yours and mine just waiting to connect with them and help, just be a shoulder to cry on, or just to say, hey, I get it. Me too. You can just talk, yell, scream, cry, whatever you need to as you're going through that storm. But I think that's really important to note as well, because sometimes you're in the storm and you just don't see the end of it.
Yes, there's so many times online where a mom will come to me and message me, or even just the community of moms that I've been able to be a part of online. And it's just so nice to be able to go to someone and send them a message or vent to them and have them know that they know exactly how I feel. And they know that they don't need to give me advice or make me feel better. They just know that sometimes you just need someone who gets it. And I totally encourage any heart family out there that needs support like that to go online, because it's so hard sometimes to get together in person, especially if you're in the hospital. But to be able to, like, there are so many Facebook groups that I've been able to be a part of that really helped me navigate making decisions and just getting feedback from other moms, and just being able to laugh at like little things, like things that random people will say that aren't actually appropriate to say to a heart family, and just being able to know that you're not the only one experiencing that is so relieving.
Yeah, exactly. So I'll make sure to include in the show notes, Cortney, you and I can kind of talk offline too, of some resources we can share with some families if your child was just diagnosed, or if you're pregnant with a child that's going to be born with a congenital heart defect. You and I can list some resources for them to help them connect with some other heart families, because like we've said over and over again during this interview, connecting with other families that have been in similar shoes it's a game changer. It really helps you get through that storm.
Yes.
So, well, I know, let's wrap up a little bit here. You know, you're a mom, you are also a life coach. What is coming up for you this month? I know you had some new resources coming for people. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I have a course coming out, and it is a self-love and confidence course where I work one-on-one with other women who want to be more confident and want to be able to accept their whole selves. And I've found with my clients that a lot of the lack of confidence comes from a lack of self-love. And I have this super easy tip that anyone can apply in 2 seconds. This tool that I encourage everyone to do, especially my clients. So right before I go to bed, I tell myself good night. And that includes saying, I love you, Cortney. And the first time I did it, it was really awkward and weird, and I kind of giggled. But the second night I did it, I said, I love you, Cortney. And I got really emotional because I had just had a hard day with my kids, and I wasn't the patient mom that I wanted to be. And I yelled and I was frustrated most of the day. And then I heard myself say, I love you, Cortney. And that overwhelming acceptance of myself in that moment was so powerful. And I just really needed to hear myself say that. And so I say it to myself every night before I go to bed. I tell my husband good night, and then I get to tell myself good night. And anybody who wants to feel a little more acceptance and self-love and in turn confidence, just tell yourself good night and tell yourself that you love you.
I freaking love that. I'm going to say I love you, Emily, tonight when I go to bed. That gave me goosebumps. How often do we, like you said, self-love and confidence, it's hard sometimes. So actually the act of like telling yourself, hey, I love you. You're doing great things. Great job today, no matter what. It's so simple. What a great tip. What a great tip.
Yeah, it sounds so silly at first. I was like, no, I don't know if I should do this, but I did it and it's just so transformative in such an easy way.
Mm-hmm. I love it. I love it, Cortney. Okay, well, I'll make sure to share a link to that where people can connect with you and hopefully, start loving on themselves too. I love it. So, can you and tell everyone where they can find you on social media and be able to work with you as well?
Yeah, so I mostly hang out over on the gram and I'm at given_today. And I share a lot about my family life and CHDs and emotional health tips. And you can always send me a DM over there. I'm redoing my website at the moment, but I'm always free to chat in the DMs on Instagram.
Awesome. Courtney, thank you so much for taking the time. I think you offered a really interesting perspective on self-care coming from a heart mama. And like I said, we'll include a lot of links to the things we talked about today and hopefully inspire some other parents out there and to let them know that they're not alone and to really think about still putting themselves first and not feeling guilty about it while their kiddo's going through a hard time. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. This was an amazing conversation.
Awesome. Thank you. You guys, I loved this episode so much. And I have to laugh when thinking about when we recorded the episode. I could have talked to Courtney forever, but bless her heart, like she said, she lives in Hawaii. So major time difference between Indy and Hawaii. So she got up and did the interview with me. We were both in our closets, of course, trying to find a quiet place. She was up at 6 a.m. recording this interview with me. So Courtney, thanks, girl. You are Wonder Woman. But, at the end of every episode, I share my 3 biggest takeaways so you can think about putting self-care into your daily routine now. So this one's a little different to think about because these are tips to think about how to use self-care when you're going through a hard time. So, and you may be in a season where you're going through a rough patch, or you may be in a season where you feel like you are just totally buried and you don't know how you're going to get out. Self-care isn't selfish, but it can look different, like I mentioned, when you're going through a hard time. So let's go through those 3 takeaways. Number 1 is communication. So you need to tell people what you need. Okay. And you need to communicate with your partner or spouse or whoever the loved one is, maybe going through the thick of this hard time with you. What are their needs as well? Because it could look totally different. Courtney mentioned her and her husband had date nights still while their daughter Zola was in the hospital, which I think was amazing. He went and worked out. She wandered the aisles in Target, which, that's self-care any time of year. But just communicate what your needs are and really listen and make your partner's self-care needs a priority as well. Because when you're going through a hard time, like your child being very, very sick or in the hospital, it's important to put yourselves first in some capacity, no matter how big or how small. My second takeaway from my conversation with Courtney is that your feelings are valid. You're going through a roller coaster of emotions sometimes when you're going through a hard time of your life. You're sad, you're mad, you're frustrated. Sometimes there's joy. Sometimes it just feels like pure hell. Okay? Like we talked about, it's an interesting feeling when you're in the hospital with your child. It's like a time suck, if you will. But it's like time stands still at the same time, but it also goes by fast. You know, the world is still going on around you, and that may make you mad. But you know what? Your feelings are valid. You have every right to feel the feelings you're feeling, and you can find healthy ways to cope with that by just talking with somebody. So remember, again, I'm going to say it again, let it soak in and let it think. I want you to have a chance to think about what this means to you. Your feelings are valid. And lastly, I don't know about you guys, but when Cortney said that she tells herself, I love you at the end of every day, it almost took my breath away. I don't know if you heard me go, I freaking love that. This show is all about self-care and ultimately loving yourself and finding the best version of you. And to build that habit day after day, it can be so impactful. So since I had this conversation with her, you know, every night I kiss my husband goodnight, I say my prayers, I think about what I was grateful for that day, and then I say, I love you, Emily. And you may sound silly. It may sound silly to you at first. I know I felt silly the first couple of times, but I think it's really great. And it's just another tool you can add in your tool belt, like Cortney was sharing, to lead to your own version of self-care and self-love. So gang, thank you so much for listening in. Make sure you check out the show notes. Cortney was so kind to give us a lot of really great CHD resources. So if you are a fellow heart mom or heart parent listening, and especially if your child has just recently been born or diagnosed, there's some really great resources to connect with other heart families, and I'll include some as well that I've personally used through our 11-year journey with our heart hero, Dylan. So thanks again for listening. Make sure to leave a rating and review on iTunes, and give me a follow over at Emily Nichols 22, and give Cortney a follow as well, also linked in the show notes. And take a screenshot of you listening. Let us know your biggest takeaways of this conversation of trying to do self-care when it's hard. I hope you leave today feeling inspired and not feeling guilty about trying to find those little pockets of time when you're going through a hard season of life to put yourself first. So until next week, gang, thanks again for listening. And remember, self-care isn't selfish.